Jack had been on the mining outpost for only 2 days, and already the place felt wrong. It was quiet during the day, almost too quiet, and loud with strange noises at night. Most of the miners stayed in their barracks after dark, refusing to walk near the old research wing. They whispered that it belonged to some private alien company. Dangerous and secretive, Jack didn't care much for rumors. But the unease in their eyes made him curious. He was here on a delivery job, just passing through. But trouble always had a way of finding him on the 3rd night. While walking back to the cheap metal room he rented, Jack heard it for the first time. A faint sound, like someone crying, muffled by walls and distance. He stopped in the empty corridor, listening. The outpost was still. The dim lights flickering above, but the sound came again. Clearer this time, it was a voice, soft, shaking, and desperate. The sound was coming from the far end of the hallway, where a massive steel door stood. The door was tall, heavy, with thick locking bolts, and 2 red lights blinking slowly on top. Jack walked toward it, his boots echoing on the floor. The closer he got, the clearer the voice became. It was speaking words, but not all of them were human. He caught fragments of a plea, a soft "help me," mixed with sounds he couldn't understand. The tone was not like any human's. It was almost melodic, but trembling with fear. Jack felt his chest tighten. Something about that voice pulled at him in a way he couldn't explain. Just then, a security drone floated out from a side hall, its red sensor light scanning. Jack pretended to check his datapad and walked past casually. The drone hovered for a moment, then moved on. He glanced at the steel door again. But there was no handle, no keypad he could see. Only a flat surface with a scanner plate and those 2 blinking red lights. He knew this kind of door built to keep things in, not out. Whatever was inside, someone had gone to a lot of trouble. To make sure it stayed there, Jack returned to his room, but the sound of that voice stayed in his head. He sat on his bed, staring at the wall, trying to focus on the next day's departure, but then, just before midnight, he heard it again. The cry was sharper this time, a sudden scream that made his blood run cold. It carried through the ventilation pipes, faint but unmistakable. Jack stood up without thinking and grabbed his jacket. The corridor was darker now. Most of the lights switched to night mode. He moved quietly, avoiding the drone patrols. When he reached the steel door again, the sound had stopped for a moment. He wondered if he had imagined it. Then came another sound, low, broken whimper, like someone trying not to cry. Jack stepped closer, pressing his ear to the cold metal. He heard breathing, fast and shallow, and then a whisper. It wasn't in a human language, but the tone was pure desperation. It made something in him snap. "Hang on," he muttered under his breath, even though whoever was inside couldn't hear him. He stepped back and studied the door more carefully. There was no way he could open it from here, not without setting off alarms. But now, he knew one thing for certain: someone was trapped inside, and they were in trouble. He turned and walked away, his mind already working on a plan. Jack had done dangerous rescues before, but this felt different. This wasn't about money or reputation. This was about that voice, about the fear in it, about the strange mix of human and something else. Back in his room, he sat at the edge of his bed, staring at his gear bag. If he left in the morning like he planned, he could forget all this and be on his way. But he knew he wouldn't. The image of that steel door burned in his mind. He remembered the way the sound had trembled, the way it had gone silent after the scream. That silence was worse than the noise. It meant whoever was inside might not have much time left. Outside, the storm winds of the planet howled against the metal walls of the outpost. Inside, Jack sat still, listening for the voice again. When it came, faint and weak, he felt the decision settle inside him like a weight. He was going to find a way in, no matter who was guarding it. No matter what was behind that door, someone needed him, and Jack had never been the type to walk away. The outpost might belong to the aliens, the guards might be armed, and the research wing might be off limits, but none of that mattered anymore. Jack knew one thing tomorrow night. That steel door was coming down. Jack waited until the next night to make his move. The outpost was quieter than usual, with most workers sleeping after a long shift in the mines. He had spent the day studying the place, learning guard patterns, watching where the drones went. He knew he couldn't go through the front of the research wing without a full fight, so he found another way, a maintenance shaft behind the storage bay. It was small, dark, and smelled of rust, but it led exactly where he needed to go. The metal walls closed around him as he crawled forward, the sound of his breathing loud in his ears. Every few meters, he stopped to listen, making sure no alarms had been triggered. Finally, a faint blue light glowed ahead, and he reached a vent cover, peering through. Jack saw the inside of the research wing for the first time, rows of glowing tanks filled the room, each holding some strange alien specimens suspended in liquid. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had eyes that moved even though the bodies didn't. The air was cold, and the sound of humming machines filled the space. Jack pushed the vent cover loose and dropped down silently. He stayed low, moving behind work tables stacked with data pads and vials of strange glowing fluid at the far end of the room. Under the harsh white light, he saw her, the girl from behind the steel door. She was smaller than he expected. Sitting on the floor of a reinforced cage, her legs were drawn up to her chest, her long, white-furred ears hanging limp over her shoulders. Chains bound her wrists, and her fur was messy, clumped with dried blood where needles had been pushed. Her skin was pale, her silver eyes dull from exhaustion. Jack's stomach twisted when he saw the bruises on her arms. She didn't notice him at first. Her head was bowed, her breathing slow, but when he stepped closer, her ears twitched slightly, her head lifted, and those silver eyes locked on him. For a moment, they both just stared at each other. Then her lips moved, and she whispered, "Help me." In a soft, trembling voice, Jack felt a rush of anger. He moved closer, crouching near the cage. "I will," he said quietly. "But I need to know what they've done to you." She blinked slowly, like she was trying to understand his words. Before she could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Jack slipped into the shadows just as two alien scientists entered. Their tall, thin forms moved quickly as they began checking the tanks. Their voices were cold, clinical, without emotion. "Subject 7B is stable," one said in a language Jack partly understood. "She's ready for the next phase memory wipe and obedience training." The other nodded, holding up a syringe filled with bright green liquid. Jack clenched his fists, forcing himself not to move. They approached the cage, opening a small slot in the bars. The bunny girl shrank back, her ears flattening against her head. They injected the fluid into her arm without hesitation. Almost instantly, her body began to shake, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Jack's nails dug into his palms. He wanted to smash their faces in. But he couldn't, not yet. "She'll be ready in 2 days," one of the scientists said as they wrote notes on a data pad. "By then, she won't remember anything except the commands we give her." They laughed softly as they walked out, leaving her curled on the floor. When the door shut, Jack emerged from the shadows. Moving quickly to the cage, her eyes were half closed, her breathing weak. He crouched down again, speaking softly. "Stay awake, I'm coming back for you." Her gaze met his, and though she didn't speak, Hai saw something flicker their hope. Faint but real. Jack scanned the cage, noting the lock system, the security panel, and the camera in the corner. There was no way to break her out right now without setting off every alarm in the building. But now he knew exactly where she was, and exactly what they were doing too. He reached through the bars just enough to touch her chained wrist. Our ears twitched slightly at the contact. "I promise," he said quietly. "I'll come for you before they do this again." She gave the faintest nod, as if she understood. Then her head lowered again, her body trembling. Jack slipped back to the maintenance shaft. The cold air biting at his skin, he crawled through. The darkness, his mind racing. He had seen cruelty before, but this was different. They weren't just hurting her, they were erasing her. If they succeeded, she wouldn't even know who she was anymore, and Jack couldn't let that happen. By the time he climbed out of the shaft into the night air, his decision was final. The next time he walked into that cold room, it wouldn't be to hide. It would be to break her out, no matter what stood in his way. Jack couldn't sleep. The image of the bunny girl in that cage kept flashing in his mind, her silver eyes dull and tired, the trembling in her voice when she whispered for help. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the needle pushing that green liquid into her arm. He kept wondering what it was doing to her. By morning, he knew he needed answers if he was going to save her. He had to understand exactly what they were doing. He spent the day blending in with the workers, listening to gossip. Most people avoided talking about the research wing, but there were always a few who couldn't resist sharing whispers. Jack heard pieces of conversation, rumors of hybrid experiments, soldiers with animal traits, memory tampering. Some said the company running the lab had connections to mercenary groups. Others claimed the place was making living weapons to sell to the highest bidder. Jack filed it all away. Every detail another reason not to wait too long. When night came, Jack returned to the maintenance shaft. This time, he stayed hidden near the vent, watching through the grate. The scientists entered again, and he listened carefully. One of them carried a tray filled with syringes, each glowing with different colors. Another had a metal case that let out a low humming sound. They opened the cage slot again, and the bunny girl flinched but didn't resist. Jack realized she was too weak to fight back. The first scientist injected her with a blue liquid. The second placed a small device against her temple. Pressing a button, a faint light pulsed from the device, and the girl's eyes went wide. Her breathing grew rapid, her ears twitching in panic. Jack could see her hands straining against the chains, but the scientists held her still. "She's still resisting," one of them muttered, adjusting the device. The other replied, "Increase." The frequency wiped deeper. Jack's jaw clenched as he realized what they were doing. They weren't just hurting her body, they were trying to erase her memories. Piece by piece, they were cutting away who she was, replacing it with something they could control. The girl whimpered softly, her voice breaking as if she was trying to speak. Jack leaned closer, straining to hear. She whispered something in her language, over and over, like a chant, even though he couldn't understand the words.
Oh.
The desperation in them hit him like a punch. The scientists didn't care. They just kept working. One of them said, "We'll reprogram her to respond only to trigger commands." The other smirked. Soon she obeyed without question, fast reflexes, boosted senses, perfect for combat. Jack's hands shook with rage. They were turning her into a weapon against her will. When they were done, they left her slumped on the floor. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes unfocused. Jack wanted to rush in right then, but he forced himself to wait. He needed the right moment, the right plan. If he acted too soon, they'd lock her away somewhere even harder to reach. Still, seeing her like that made the waiting almost unbearable after the scientists left. Jack slipped into the room. He moved to the cage and crouched beside her. She looked at him slowly, her expression dazed. "Can you hear me?" he asked softly. Her ears twitched faintly, and she blinked twice. Jack didn't know if it was a yes or just reflex. He reached through the bars and took her hand gently. Her fingers were cold, her pulse weak. "They can't take who you are." He whispered, "I won't let them," for a moment. Something flickered in her silver eyes, a faint spark. Then she closed them, her breathing evening out. Jack stayed a few seconds longer, then pulled back. He scanned the equipment in the room, memorizing every machine, every vial, every device. If he destroyed the right things, he could buy time. If he took the right things, maybe he could even undo some of the damage. Back in his cramped room, Jack sat at the small table, drawing a rough map of the lab. He marked the cage, the exits, the guard paths. He also noted the control room he had glimpsed in the corner where the cameras and locks were managed. That would be his first target if he could take control of the system. He could open her cage and disable the alarms, but even as he planned, he knew it wouldn't be simple. The syndicate that owned this place didn't care about rules. If he was caught, they wouldn't just kill him, they'd make him disappear like they had taken her. Jack leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He had been in bad situations before, but this one felt different. This wasn't just a job or a mission. This was personal now. He thought of her whispering in that strange, soft voice. He thought of the way she had looked at him, even through her pain. It was enough to push away any hesitation. Tomorrow night. He wouldn't just be watching tomorrow night, he'd be going in, and when he did, nothing in that cold room would be left the same. Jack had counted every step, every hallway, every guard position, every sound the research wing made at night. He had watched for 3 nights in a row, memorizing the drone patterns. The plan wasn't perfect, but waiting any longer meant risking the girl's mind being completely erased. Tonight was the night. He strapped on his gear, checked his sidearm, and slid a small breaching charge into his jacket pocket. The air in the outpost was still heavy with the smell of oil and dust. Jack moved fast but silent through the service corridors. Keeping to the shadows, he passed 2 drones without being seen, ducking into alcoves just as their red sensors swept by. His heart beat steady, his breathing slow. He reached the steel door, the same one he had stood in front of days ago when he first heard her voice. This time, he wasn't leaving without her. Jack pulled out the stolen access card he had lifted from a careless guard earlier. He swiped it across the scanner. A harsh beep and a red light told him what he already expected. It was restricted access. No more waiting. No more sneaking. Jack stepped back, planted his boot firmly, and kicked hard. The sound of the impact thundered down the hallway. The door shuddered but held. He kicked again, his muscles burning with effort. The second hit weakened the frame, and the third sent the heavy steel swinging inward with a screech. Alarms exploded in the air, flashing red lights painting the corridor. Guards shouted somewhere ahead, their boots pounding the floor. Jack stepped through the doorway into the lab, moving quickly toward the cage. He didn't care about the scientists who turned to stare in shock. He went straight for the girl. Her ears twitched as she saw him, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Get up," he said, his voice low but urgent. She tried, but her legs wouldn't hold her. Jack didn't hesitate. He shot the lock panel on the cage, sparks flying, and the door swung open. A guard appeared in the doorway. Raising a stun rifle, Jack rolled to the side, firing 2 quick shots that sent the guard crumpling to the floor. Another guard rushed in, swinging a baton. Jack blocked the strike with his forearm and slammed his elbow into the guard's jaw. Dropping him cold, the scientists backed away. One fumbling for a device. Jack grabbed it and smashed it under his boot. The girl was still struggling to move, so Jack bent and scooped her up into his arms. Her head rested against his shoulder. Her breath warm but shallow. More guards poured in from the side corridor. Jack ducked behind a lab table as shots cracked through the air. Attain last tanks. Strange creatures inside the tanks thrashed wildly as fluid spilled across the floor. Jack tossed a smoke grenade, the thick cloud filling the room in seconds. He dashed toward the service exit he had marked on his map, carrying the girl tightly through the haze. He could hear the angry shouts of the guards and the hiss of escaping gas from broken machines. At the exit door, he swiped the stolen card. Again? This time, the light flashed green, and the door slid open with a hiss. He slipped into the dim service tunnel, his boots splashing through shallow water on the floor. The girl stirred weakly in his arms, her voice barely a whisper. "You came." "Back," she said, her words broken but full of relief. "I told you I would," Jack replied, not slowing his pace halfway down the tunnel. 2 more guards blocked the way. Jack shifted the girl gently onto a maintenance cart and stepped forward. 1 guard lunged with a stun baton. Jack sidestepped, grabbing the guard's wrist and twisting. Until the weapon clattered to the ground, the second raised his rifle, but Jack kicked it from his hands and drove him into the wall. Both guards dropped, groaning, and Jack was already pulling the cart forward. The sound of pursuit echoed from behind, boots splashing through the water. At the end of the tunnel, he reached a small loading bay that opened into the night air. Cold wind whipped against his face, carrying the faint scent of rain. Jack spotted a hovercraft parked near the fence, a worker's transport. Still powered on, he lifted the girl into the passenger seat and climbed in. The engine hummed to life, and the craft began to rise. Behind them, the tunnel door burst open and guards poured out, firing into the darkness. Jack slammed the throttle forward, the hovercraft surging into the night. Bright beams from searchlights swept the skies as the outpost alarms continued to blare. Jack weaved through the rocky canyons outside the station. Using the terrain to hide from the patrol ships, the girl clung weakly to his jacket. Her breathing unsteady but alive. They weren't safe yet, by a long shot, but she was out of that cage, and Jack swore to himself she was never going back. The hovercraft sped into the dark canyon. Wind tore at Jack's face as the engines roared. He kept low, hugging the ground so the patrol ships above couldn't get a lock on him. Behind them, the outpost alarms still wailed, echoing off the cliffs. The girl was shivering beside him, her long ears flattened against her head. Jack glanced at her, seeing how pale she looked. Her wrists were raw from the chains, her breath short and uneven. "You're safe now," he said quickly, but he knew the words were only half true. They still had to get far away before the syndicate could send more hunters. A flash of light streaked past the hovercraft, followed by the crack of an energy bolt. Jack swore under his breath and swerved hard to the left. 2 small patrol drones had found them, their red lights flashing like angry eyes. They darted overhead, firing in short bursts that lit up the canyon walls. Jack leaned forward, pushing. The hovercrafts throttled to maximum, the engine strained, the craft shaking as it skimmed dangerously close to jagged rock. "Hold on," he told her, gripping the controls tight. The drones closed in. Weaving to cut off his escape path, Jack jerked the craft upward just in time, the bottom scraping against a ridge with a shower of sparks. The girl gasped, but held onto the seat, her eyes wide. One of the drones swooped lower, trying to ram them. Jack slammed the brakes, letting the drone overshoot, then gunned the engine again. The hovercraft shot forward. Chasing the drone from behind, Jack grabbed the small blaster from his belt, aimed, and fired twice. The shots hit the drone's side, and it exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the night. The second drone banked hard and pulled back, likely calling for reinforcements. Jack knew he couldn't stay in the open. He spotted a narrow tunnel in the canyon wall ahead, a path only a small craft could fit through. He steered toward it, the girl leaning close as the walls tightened around them. The tunnel was dark, lit only by the hovercraft's front lights. Water dripped from the ceiling, the sound echoing in the narrow space behind them. Faint engine noise told him the remaining drone was still on their trail. The tunnel twisted sharply to the right, and Jack used the turn to slow down just enough to let the drone catch up. When it rounded the bend, Jack fired again, the blast striking it squarely. The drone dropped to the tunnel floor, sparking and twitching before going silent. Jack didn't slow, steering deeper into the winding path until it opened into a hidden valley. The air here was still, almost too still, with tall cliffs blocking the view from above. It was the perfect place to stop and regroup. Jack eased the hovercraft down beside a cluster of rocks and shut off the engine. The sudden silence made the girl's soft breathing seem loud in the night. He looked over and saw her slumping forward, her eyes half closed. Jack moved quickly to check her pulse. It was there, but weak. "You're going to be all right," he told her, though worry gnawed him. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small med kit, carefully. He cleaned the wounds on her wrists and wrapped them with clean bandages. Her silver eyes fluttered open for a moment, and she whispered something in her own language. Jack shook his head gently. "I don't understand," he said. "But you're safe with me." She gave the faintest nod before her eyes closed again. Exhausted, Jack adjusted his jacket and wrapped it around her for warmth. The night air in the valley was cold, and her small frame shivered under the fabric. He looked around, knowing they couldn't stay here forever. The syndicate's trackers would be scanning the area soon. Jack pulled a small device from his belt. Signal scrambler. He activated it, sending out waves to block scanning frequencies for at least an hour. That would buy them time, but not much. He needed a safe house, somewhere far enough that they could rest without being hunted. Jack remembered an old smuggler's station about 20 kilometers east. It was hidden in a canyon and abandoned years ago after a raid. If it was still intact, it could be the perfect hiding place. He started the hovercraft again, keeping the lights dim to avoid drawing attention. The girl stirred slightly as they moved, resting her head against his shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it made his chest tighten with determination. The journey through the rocky landscape was slow. Jack took winding paths, doubling back twice to throw off any possible trackers. At one point, a patrol ship roared overhead, its spotlights sweeping the ground. Jack cut the engine and waited in silence as the beam passed. Only when the sound faded into the distance did he move again. Finally, after what felt like hours, he spotted the outline of the old station in the moonlight. It was a squat, rusting building tucked into the canyon wall. Jack guided the hovercraft inside through a broken hangar door. The place smelled of dust and oil, but it was dry and hidden. He parked in the shadows and carried the girl inside. Laying her on an old cot, he checked her breathing again, was steady now. Jack sat beside her, listening to the quiet. They had escaped for now, but he knew the fight was far from over. And tomorrow, the real battle to keep her free would begin. The old smuggler station was quiet. Dust covered the floors, and the smell of rust hung in the air. The only light came from a single lantern Jack had found in the storage room. Its soft glow filled the small space where the girl lay on the cat, wrapped in his jacket. Jack sat in a chair nearby, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees for the first time since the rescue. There were no alarms, no chasing drones, no gunfire. Only the sound of her slow breathing. She stirred after a while, her ears twitching slightly before her silver eyes blinked open. Jack leaned closer. "You're safe," he said quietly. She looked around the room, confusion clear on her face. "This is a hidden place," Jack explained. "No one will find us here tonight." Her gaze moved back to him, studying his face as if trying to understand why he had helped her. "You came back," she whispered, her voice soft and fragile. Jack gave a small nod. "I promised." She tried to sit up, but her body was weak. Jack reached out and gently helped her, adjusting the pillow behind her back. He noticed her wrists again, the fresh bandages already spotted with a bit of blood. He checked them carefully, tightening the wraps. Her fur brushed against his fingers. Soft, even though it was messy from the lab, she didn't pull away from anything. She leaned slightly into his touch. It wasn't trust yet, but it was the beginning of something. "What's your name?" Jack asked. She hesitated, as if the question was hard to answer. Finally, she spoke. "Leora," the word almost a sigh. Jack repeated it slowly, letting the sound settle in the air. Leora, her ears lifted just slightly at the way he said it. "And you?" she asked softly, her voice accented but clear. "Jack," he replied, giving a small smile. "Just Jack." For a moment, they sat in silence. Then she asked, "Why?" Jack frowned. "Why what?" "Why risk your life for me?" she said, her eyes searching his face. Jack thought for a second before answering. "Because you didn't deserve what they were doing to you?" he said simply. Her eyes shimmered as if she was holding back tears. No one has ever said that before," she murmured. She told him in short, broken sentences. About the night she was taken, her homeworld was peaceful. A place of wide green plains and tall crystal trees. The syndicate raided during the night, taking her and others from her village. She was chosen for experiments because of her species' speed, sharp senses, and agility. They hurt me, made me fight, made me forget, she said, her voice trembling. Jack clenched his jaw, trying to keep the anger out of his voice. "They can't take who you are," he told her firmly. No matter what they did, Leora's ears lowered, but she gave a faint smile. "You are different," she said quietly. "Humans, in the stories, they are dangerous." Jack chuckled without humor. "Some of us are," he admitted, "but some of us fight for the right reasons." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded as if deciding something. "I trust you," she said softly. The words caught Jack off guard. Trust was not something she could give lightly after what she had been through. He didn't reply right away, just met her gaze and gave a small nod. He stood and went to the corner, pulling out food from his pack. It wasn't much dried rations, a bottle of water and a few protein bars. He broke one in half and handed it to her. She took it carefully, sniffing it before taking a small bite. Her nose wrinkled at the taste. But she kept eating. Jack smiled faintly. "Not exactly a feast, but it'll keep you alive." She tilted her head, ears twitching slightly. "Better than the lab food," she said, almost smiling after she ate. Jack set up a blanket near the cot for himself. "You sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch." Leora frowned. "You need rest too. I've slept in worse places," he replied, leaning back against the wall. She hesitated, then reached out, her fingers brushing his sleeve. "You are not leaving?" she asked, her voice almost fearful. "Not unless you tell me to," Jack said, without hesitation. Her eyes softened, and she pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "Then I can sleep," she whispered, closing her eyes. Jack stayed awake for hours, listening to the wind outside the station. Every so often, Leora's ears twitched in her sleep, as if reacting to distant sounds only she could hear. He wondered what nightmares she carried from the lab, and he swore silently that he would not let them catch her again. By the time the first light of dawn touched the edges of the canyon, Jack knew the bond between them had changed. She was no longer just someone he had rescued. She was someone he would protect with his life. Jack woke to the sound of engines in the distance. It wasn't the faint hum of mining craft. This was heavier, deeper, the sound of syndicate gunships. He rose instantly, checking the small scanner he had set up during the night. 3 red blips were moving fast toward the canyon. They had found them. Leora was still asleep, her breathing steady. Jack hated to wake her, but there was no time. He touched her shoulder gently. "Leora, we have to go." Her silver eyes opened slowly, confusion flashing before she understood. "They're here," she whispered, her ears twitching at the sound of the engines. "Jack, nodded. Already strapping on his gear. We'll have to fight our way out, he said. Are you ready? She sat up, still weak but determined. I can hear their steps, she said. Tilting her head toward the canyon entrance, 3 groups, moving to surround. Her senses were sharper than his. A gift from her species and, maybe, from the experiments. Jack loaded his rifle, handing her a smaller blaster. Stay close to me, he told her. I will. She replied, her voice calm despite the danger. The first wave of enemies appeared at the canyon mouth. Armored figures moving fast, Jack fired first. Hitting 2 before they could take cover, Leora stayed low, her eyes scanning the shadows. There, she pointed sharply, and Jack turned just in time to drop another guard trying to flank them. Bolts of energy lit up the narrow canyon, striking rock and sending dust into the air. Jack and Leora moved together. Covering each other without words, a grenade landed nearby. Jack grabbed Leora and pulled her behind a pile of scrap just as it exploded. The blast shaking the ground, the gunships above roared. Searchlights sweeping across the canyon floor. One ship lowered, opening its side hatch, more troops jumped. Out firing as they landed, Jack gritted his teeth. They're not stopping, he muttered. Leora's ears twitched again. Leader is with them, she said. I can hear his voice. Moments later, a tall alien stepped forward from the smoke, his armor black and lined with glowing red marks. His voice carried through the canyon, cold and mocking. Human, he called. You have something that belongs to us. Jack stepped out from cover, his rifle ready. She doesn't belong to anyone, he shouted back, the leader's eyes narrowed. Then you will both die. The fight turned brutal, close range, and fast. Jack slammed one guard into the canyon wall, using the fallen man's rifle to drop another. Leora moved with surprising speed, her reflexes sharp. Firing precise shots at any enemy who came too close, they fought side by side. Covering each other as the syndicate forces pushed harder, Jack could feel his muscles burning, but he refused. To slow every time he looked at Leora, he saw not fear, but determination. The leader charged forward, swinging a heavy shock baton. Jack blocked it with his rifle. The force rattling his arms, they traded blows. Sparks flying as metal clashed, finally. Jack found an opening and drove his elbow into the alien's jaw. The leader stumbled, but recovered quickly. Aiming a strike at Leora, Jack stepped in the way, taking the hit to his side, the shock jolting. Through him, he gritted his teeth and slammed the butt of his rifle into the leader's helmet. Cracking it, Leora seized the moment, firing a shot that knocked the weapon from the leader's hands. Jack followed with a hard kick that sent the alien crashing to the ground. The remaining troops hesitated, looking at their fallen commander. Jack aimed his rifle at the leader's head, his voice cold. She's free, he said. And if you come for her again, none of you will leave alive. The silence stretched for a few long seconds. Then the leader signaled his troops to retreat, his eyes burning with anger, but knowing he had lost this fight. The gunships lifted off, the sound of their engines fading into the distance. Jack lowered his rifle slowly, his chest rising and falling with each deep breath. He turned to Leora, who stood with her blaster still in hand. Her ears high. It's over, he said. For now, she replied softly, but her voice held. Something else, trust, and maybe even hope. They walked back to the smuggler station together. The canyon quiet once more, inside. Jack sat heavily in the chair, his side aching from the blow he had taken. Leora knelt beside him, her hands gentle as she checked the injury. You protected me, she said quietly. Jack gave a small smile. We protected each other. Her silver eyes met his, and she gave a faint smile in return. You kicked down their door. And? Mine, she whispered. Jack didn't fully understand her words, but he felt their weight. In that moment, he knew he hadn't just saved her life. He had given her a reason to keep living it.